Chimi and Jason, both of you were arrested during the flame lighting ceremony in Olympia in Greece recently. What was the charge? I would guess you understood the risk of being arrested before taking action. So what could you expect to get? And in retrospect, have you reached your goal?
Mm-hmm. First of all, thank you, Stella, for having us here. Yes, we did go into the action understanding that there might be a possible arrest. However, understanding the current situation inside of Tibet, Hong Kong, East Turkestan, and what is happening in the geopolitical situation against Taiwan and all of the South China Sea borders, it was very important for us to be there and protesting and making sure that the world heard us when we said that we should be boycotting Beijing 2022. Our goal has yet to be reached because our goal is to move the games from Beijing. We do not think that China deserves to be hosting the Olympics whatsoever, given their brutal human rights record. And we hope that all athletes, broadcasters, sponsors, and all people of conscience will join us in boycotting Beijing 2022.
Yeah, so I think we are fortunate enough, Chumi, I, and Fern, the other activists, to live in countries that should, no, they don't always do, but should allow us the right to protest. And I feel that we need to be doing all we can, taking advantage of those privileges to raise awareness of the human rights abuses that Chinese Communist Party carry out and try to hide. Obviously, after the 2008 or during the 2008 Olympics, there was a Tibetan uprising, and that the protests were brutally put down. I think the Dalai Lama said that there were around 400 Tibetans killed during those protests, and over 1,000 went missing. So they have no right to protest, and anytime they do try to protest, they're arrested, they're tortured, sometimes killed in prison. So I definitely feel that, yes, I knew that there was a chance of arrest going in, but I felt that if we don't do that, as people that have that privilege, then Tibetans can't. So yeah, I was more than happy to take that risk of arrest to raise the awareness of the situation in Tibet and in Hong Kong and East Turkestan as well.
I know you travel all the way from Canada and the UK and probably are facing complicated legal process now. And also, what would happen when the legal procedure continues? What kind of complications could it bring to your life and probably international travel?
Yes, it is complicated. It is not fun having a charge. It was my first time experiencing jail, and it definitely was not fun. But like Jason mentioned again, compared to what people, our brothers and sisters, have to go through back home, is almost like it was nothing. And each time, moments before I jumped out with Jason and Fern, the video that I posted on my social media of Tibetans trying to cross the Nangpala Pass, where they're being shot by Chinese militants, continued to play in my head. And when that happened, I got the courage and strength to stand up and speak what I needed to say.
I think not only is our message to the CCP that we are watching and we're not going to stay quiet and we refuse to stay silent, but we also have a strong message for the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, that how can they give the Winter Olympics, another Olympics to Beijing after what happened in 2008? And in 2014, when the IOC awarded the Winter Games to Sochi in Russia, there was lots of controversy over that, Russia's anti-gay rights. So after that Olympics, the IOC added a clause to the Olympic Charter, and that clause says any form of discrimination with regard to a country or a person on grounds of race, religion, politics, gender, or otherwise is incompatible with belonging to the Olympic movement. So how can they have that written in their charter and then award China the Winter Olympics literally like the next year or a couple of years after? It just doesn't. The IOC are saying one thing with their charters and their ceremony, and then doing their actions are saying something completely different. And by giving Beijing the Winter Olympics, it's just it's mind-boggling, to be perfectly honest. I just don't understand how they can just live themselves by giving the IOC, by giving Beijing the Winter Olympics.
The The Winter Olympics in Beijing are scheduled to begin next February. What could people that are concerned do in the next 2 months before the games started? And what are some of your plans next?
First and foremost, there is still time left. The campaign is not over. We have to continue putting pressure on the IOC to move the games. And if not, I'm sure you folks have seen, we've already started a new campaign where we're asking for athletes to join us. We want athletes to join us in standing up for human rights, whether or not they decide to participate in the Olympic Games coming up in China. We want them to reach out to us, educate themselves, have a conversation with a Chinese dissident, have a conversation with a Tibetan, a Hong Konger, or a Uyghur about what is happening inside because of the brutal authoritarian state the Chinese Communist Party is. And then we're also having conversations with broadcasters and sponsors. We want to hold sponsors like Airbnb, Coca-Cola, Intel, and other companies accountable for making money off of this genocide. When we allow this Beijing Olympics to happen, we are helping Chinese government legitimize the genocide that they're doing. The whole purpose of why they want to host these Olympics, even though the Chinese government pretends to not care about what the international community thinks, they continue to seek this seal of approval. They want to seek legitimacy. They want to be known in the world as a superpower, right? And so this way of seeking legitimacy is not something we can allow the Chinese government to have. Hence why we must continue the work that we're doing, be it educating, raising awareness, and getting athletes, sponsors, and broadcasters to join our plight. And the fight is not over after the Olympics, right? The genocide is still being committed. Tibetans are being incredibly repressed under all of these laws. I implore all of us to continue doing the work because it's not over yet.
From a local point of view, it's a case of talking to your local government officials. So in the UK, your MP, and telling them that you do not feel that your Olympic Association, so again in the UK it's the British Olympic Association, if the IOC refuse to move the games, the country's Olympic associations can say we're not going to send our athletes.
Ximi, I know you collaborated with Hong Kongers, Uyghurs, and Chinese dissidents to call for boycotting Winter Olympics in Beijing. What were in common among the groups, and what was the strategy gathering smaller groups together?
First and foremost, I think the common denominator is that we're all humans of conscience. We care about other people. And second of all, we are all somehow connected by the authoritarian state of the Chinese government. We are subjected to the violence and the repression that is being put on us by the Chinese government. So whether it is Uyghurs who are currently being eliminated, in these concentration camps, or if it's Tibetans or Southern Mongolians whose children as young as 3 years old are being forced to go to schools away from their home and being forced to learn Chinese instead of their own mother tongue. And then the Hong Kongers, it's without having to say anything, the world has seen how the Chinese government has brutally destroyed the Hong Kong's democracy. And currently, young leaders like Joshua Wong are still in jail. And so without anything to be said, like there was a common ground for all of us to unite because we all understood each other's pain. And if I were to speak personally, the pain of not being able to contact your family members, the pain of not being able to know what your own homeland looks like. There were so many parts, whether it was personal or as global as being a global citizen. There were common factors and denominators that brought us together to call for this campaign. And ultimately, the campaign is to hold the Chinese government accountable and tell the world that this is going to be our red line, that we were not going to let the Chinese government seek the legitimacy and approval that they want from the international world and within their own country while they're committing all of these brutal human rights atrocities.
For me, obviously, I work at Free Tibet and very much in allyship with all other Tibet support groups, so students of Free Tibet, the Tibet community in Britain. So we're very focused on making these connections with all other groups, not just Tibetan support groups, but like you have mentioned, Hong Kong support groups and Uyghur support groups and these other support groups that face the oppression and repression that the Chinese Communist Party are forcing on them. So yeah, that's
Jason, I know you're from the UK and now working for Free Tibet. What makes you become an activist on this issue? And would you urge more British or American joining the cause?
Of course. So it's a cause that impacts everyone. It's a human rights issue. This isn't just looking at Tibetans. This is looking at the severe human rights abuses being carried out in various places across the world. I definitely call for anyone in the UK or anyone in America or around the world. I know Students for Free Tibet have chapters all over the world.
In light of the current events happening and the current conversations around the world of COP26 and climate justice, it is appalling to know that Tibet has no representation at such big platforms where climate is being discussed, where the poster of these events are usually the snow mountains of Tibet. Tibet is known as the rooftop of the world, and it's currently melting 3 times faster than the rest of the world. And so if people are talking about climate and talking about caring for the climate, it's about time that we put Tibet back on the map and have these conversations with Tibetan representation, because if Tibet melts, and if we don't do anything about the Tibetan situation and the Tibetan plateau, the downstream countries, which is about almost 2 billion people in the world, their lives will be affected. And China currently has been the biggest manufacturer of dams, and they're creating dams that redirect the water that flows down into the downstream countries. And that in itself is going to be another big global issue that needs to be talked about. And so whether or not you care about Tibetan issues or Hong Kong issues or Uyghur issues or Chinese issues, if you care about the climate, this is something to care about, because, if there is no Mother Earth, then none of us would be here.
Jason, I know that you were participating in the COP26. Could you tell us some of your actions and how does it turn out?
Yeah, so it's been absolutely amazing. Well, first, as Chima said, the most ridiculous thing is it's no Tibetan representation actually on the negotiating table in COP. And China have not sent any key officials over, so that they straight away have signaled their intention that they're not going to take part, or they're not interested in trying to reduce carbon emissions. They've set targets that are absolutely ridiculous, and almost it's just a massive greenwashing. So whilst we've been here, we've had on Saturday there was the climate justice protests, and in Glasgow itself there were estimated 100,000 people came and marched through Glasgow, and the Tibetan community and from the UK and from other parts of the world was absolutely amazing. We were at the front of the protest for pretty much the entire day. It didn't matter where you were, you could see Tibetan flags. The Tibetans that were here were singing and chanting and dancing the entire way. I think we handed out over 2,000 leaflets to people. There were countless interviews with local media and world media to raise the awareness of the Tibet climate crisis. So it's been absolutely amazing being up here and seeing how passionate the Tibetan community in the UK and around the world are and can be. So yeah, it's been absolutely excellent.
In Xi Jinping's tenure, any major differences you have seen for your cause and for the future of Tibet? And we know that he will continue to rule China for another 5 years, if not even longer. Do you feel like it will get more challenging for Tibet's future? And what do you expect him to do in the near future?
The fact that Wang Zhuzheng got promoted from East Turkestan to now become the party leader of Tibet, the Tibetan Autonomous Region is what they call, in itself is a statement that the Chinese government does not care about what the international world had to say about East Turkestan's treatment. A lot of governments have recognized that a genocide is happening and they want it to stop, but the Chinese government clearly has not taken anything into consideration and in fact promoted the guy that was responsible for all of those actions in East Turkestan to Tibet so that he can continue doing what he has done in East Turkestan in Tibet. If that is not a sign for the international world that the situation is becoming worse, I don't know what else to tell you. Previously, we've also talked about Chen Guangzhou, who was responsible for Tibet initially for the 5 years, the TAR region, and then he was transferred to East Turkestan. And it was known that a lot of the surveillance systems and the re-education camp tactics that were implemented in East Turkestan were actually first trialed in Tibet. and the Tibetan Autonomous Region. So there's this negative feedback looping that the Chinese government is doing and trialing with East Turkestan and Tibet that we cannot allow as the international community to continue happening. Just from my personal experience, the amount of Tibetans that are able to escape into India and Nepal has decreased tremendously. There was a time when we would hear about Tibetans escaping into Nepal and India. Nowadays, I don't hear any stories about anyone being able to escape into India and Nepal and seek, have freedom. And that in itself tells me how the situation inside of Tibet is worsening. And without being said, China currently has surveillance systems that are so advanced, and Tibet is so surveilled that 24/7 at every meter there is some sort of surveillance happening, which is restricting people's movement, in addition to the socio political, democratic, every way of repression that one person can imagine. And then the Human Rights Watch report on language has been a testament to how the Chinese government is trying to eliminate the Tibetan identity by, erasing their mother tongue language from all of the local schools.
It's the education side that is for me, it's really shocking, that the forced closure of Tibetan language schools, the arrest of Tibetan teachers. So there was Rin Shen-Ki, who was recently arrested, I think on August the 1st. She was a school teacher at a Tibetan language school. She was arrested, given no reason for her arrest, and has since disappeared. She's got a young daughter and a husband. I have no idea where she is or what her health, how her current health is, or anything. And she was arrested just for teaching Tibetan. That was it. So the crackdown on Tibetan language and Tibetan education, and obviously what they want to do is to stop children growing up speaking Tibetan. They want them to grow up speaking Chinese. By they, I mean the CCP want them to grow up speaking Chinese and to try and completely systematically eradicate that Tibetan culture and way of life. So for me, I think that's something that's a real pressing issue at the moment, and something that really needs global focus.